Also, hearing you kind of compare the progressive design build and bid, what is it?
Design bid build.
It sounds like progressive design build inherently allows for more transparency as well.
100%.
Yeah, definitely picking up on that. And
Yeah.
of course, here at the Las Virgenes Triunfo Joint Powers Authority, aka the JPA, that is one of our guiding principles: transparency.
Short on local water supplies and long on regulatory requirements. Do a deep dive with us by listening to the Full Circle podcast to learn how Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Triunfo Water and Sanitation District are meeting 21st century water supply challenges for a portion of the Los Angeles and Ventura County regions.
Hello, and welcome back to the Full Circle podcast. My name is Riki Clark. I am your humble host. And I am joined today by two amazing experts in what our topic today is going to be, which is progressive design build. And we are going to jump straight into this episode because I'm pretty much a lay person when it comes to progressive design build, which is great because we'll kind of be in the same boat, myself, the listeners, and the viewers. But we have some people that really know their stuff when it comes to this, decades of experience in what we're talking about. What is design build as it relates to the Pure Water project? Why is it important? Why are we going down this route? That's what we're all covering today. So we're going to be learning something new and fresh and illuminating, hopefully. So why don't we just dive right in? I will start with perhaps a familiar face, which is my coworker and colleague, Oliver Slosser. Oliver has been with the district for, 4 years now?
Yep, about that.
Yeah, so you are a senior engineer. Now you are our project engineer.
Engineering program manager.
Program manager. I should probably know official titles by now, right?
It's a long one.
It's kind of my job as a podcast host. But if he looks familiar to you, that's because Oliver joined us in the first season of the Full Circle podcast. He's actually our very first guest because we do sometimes shoot our episodes out of order. And so we got to kind of get primed to this whole podcast experience together. And we talked about some of the technicalities with the Pure Water process. So I will let Oliver kind of introduce himself in a second. But before that, I would also like to introduce our very, very special guest who flew in all the way from Portland here today just to join us in person to chat about PDB, none other than Michelle Green. She is the vice president as well as the DB sales director and lead for Jacobs, which is a part of our PDB team for the Pure Water project. So we're looking, again, at decades and decades of experience in engineering and water projects. So when I say experts, I really mean it. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah. Excited to have you guys on. I'm excited to learn. Again, I'm not super well read on what PDB is. I know the high points, but I'm really interested in kind of getting in the nitty gritty on what it is and why it's important and optimal for the Pure Water project. So let's get a little bit of lay of the land. Yeah. Michelle, first, can you kind of tell us about your role with Jacobs, your experience with PDB, and a little bit of your background in water projects?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a wastewater engineer by background, trade and training. I have almost a little over 30 years of experience working in the water and wastewater industry, designing projects for municipalities. So with Jacobs, over the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years, I've been working with projects that are executing using different delivery models, including design build and progressive design build. That my role within Jacobs is to support teams like Las Virgenes in this project in making sure that when they execute those jobs that they're leveraging the best practices that have been developed in the industry. So that's my role within Jacobs, but I also have a second hat. I am heavily engaged in a national nonprofit association, industry association called the Water Collaborative Delivery Association. I'm president of the association this year. And so that is an organization that's comprised of engineering consultants, contractors, design builders, suppliers, really focused on developing best practices around collaborative delivery models, and progressive design build is one of those, to make sure that we figure out what's working well for people, what's not working, what are best practices, and then we have quite a bit of education and advocacy around really disseminating that so owners are benefiting from what else is going on and making sure that they execute these projects in a way that produces the results that they're after. So, 2 hats.
Yes, but a whole lot of expertise.
Whole lot of expertise, yeah.
That's what matters. Very nice. And Oliver, can you give us a refresher about your background and your experience with engineering and water projects?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I've been with the district for 4 years, as you said. I came on as a senior engineer in 2020. Was in that role for about 2 years and then transitioned into engineering program manager, where I manage our bigger capital projects, multi-year projects, primarily right now the pure water project. So my background is I had about 9 years previously in private consulting, project manager, project engineer, doing a lot of water resources work. Up until when I came here, delivered most of my projects in that traditional design, bid, build. With the Pure Water project, this is, not just new for yourself and the listeners and the viewers, but it's new for Las Virgenes as well. This is the first progressive design build project that we've done. So I worked very closely with Michelle and a lot of other experts to help set up our contracts for it and get our staff trained to deliver in this new method, which really was sort of a complete shift in how we typically deliver projects.
Yeah, very cool. So we have a lot of expertise both on the private and public side between the two of you, which is really important. So let's jump right in. Yeah? What the heck is progressive design build? What is it? What is PDB? You guys know we like to use a lot of acronyms in water, so PDB is progressive design build. We'll be saying that a lot throughout this episode. What is it? And why is it the best approach? Obviously, you talked about how this is something new. What is so innovative about this?
Right. So maybe I'll start with the norm, right? The way that the water market, the water industry, and service providers have been delivering projects for decades and decades. And that traditional approach, and Oliver referred to it as design, bid, build, where you have an engineer that works with an owner, they develop the design, they produce 100% set of plans and specs, and then they go out to the market and a contractor bids on that. Mm-hmm. And then they build what's on those drawings. So some of the challenges around that delivery approach is that there's not an opportunity for the designer and the contractor to work together.
Yeah.
There's also tends to be kind of, performance gaps. And so for projects, and then the really big piece is it's a low bid.
Right.
It's a low bid, and as our life and universe has gotten more and more litigious, right, there are challenges. When problems happen, there's not a contractual mechanism that incentivizes all parties to work together.
Right.
Often, you got great people, great organizations, and they work it out and they figure it out. So what progressive design build does is it changes kind of how the designer and the contractor work together and work with the owner. And so basically progressive design build, you're hiring a single entity. Could be an organization that has both design and construction capability, or an organization that has, the designer working for a contractor or contractor working for a designer, but there's one contract with the owner. And that entity is first and foremost selected based on qualifications.
Right.
So when a project's really important to get right, when it's a little outside the norm of what we do on a day-to-day basis in the water space, qualifications are really important. So I will start there. I could go on, but I'm going to let you just jump in and add your thoughts on defining progressive design build.
It's a great, great high-level characterization of it. And one thing I'd add to that traditional way of doing projects, the design, bid, build, is the owner carries a lot of risk along with that method. When we take those 100% designs, we're taking ownership of it. Mm-hmm. So when we hand it to a contractor and put it out to bid, we're saying that these are 100% correct. And so anything that is not 100% correct that got missed during that process, it ends up being a cost for us, the owner. When we set up this collaborative environment where the designer and the contractor are working together, there's a shared risk there, and the contractor is talking to the designer as the design is progressing. A lot of times they're leading the team, and so a lot of those things that may only get caught at a later stage in the traditional method they're being talked about early on and being addressed early on before they become a big cost. So risk is a big part of why you might deliver one of these projects.
Yeah.
Another thing is schedule. When you're able to have the contractor involved from the beginning, by the time you get to 60% or 100% design, they're already out looking at equipment. They're already making plans for how to prep the site. So it leads to a shorter project schedule. And as we talked about the last time we met, Pure Water Project is regulatory driven. So we have this hard deadline.
Yeah.
And to deliver a $466 million project in 4 or 5 years, you really need that collaborative environment in order to meet the goals.
Right, and let me add one thing about kind of that risk transfer and risk allocation, which is a key aspect of this delivery model. Oliver spoke to it, right? The owner's taking a little bit less risk, and the progressive design builder is taking on more risk. In the instance of progressive design build, there's an opportunity for the owner to say, I want you to make sure that at the end of the day, this entire system works and does exactly what it's supposed to do. And if it doesn't, you have to fix it, which is dramatically different than in design bid build, when an owner is the one that's taking on the risk because they've been working with the designer to say, yeah, this is the system and the tools and the structures and the equipment that we need to meet this end goal. In this instance, you can say that's your responsibility. And so when you have a project that is a little bit new and unique and higher levels of technology to meet the end goal, it's one of the values that progressive design build can provide when an owner says, I'd rather that this other entity take on responsibility for meeting these performance requirements.
Yeah, it sounds a bit more dynamic, right? When you guys describe the more traditional design bid build, that sounds very rigid, right?
It is.
And you spoke about selecting a design builder based on experience, expertise, things like that. If it's not based on a competitive bidding process, how do you still make sure we're getting a good price? Because you kind of mentioned like the cost effectiveness in this, or that factor. How do we ensure we're getting a good price?
It is a great question, and one that really is a lot of the focus that both Oliver and his team, and then the Jacobs team advising Oliver's team will be we'll be focusing on that a lot as we move through the design. So first and foremost, I said that the design builder is chosen primarily based on qualifications. So experience, the team, do they work together? Are they fun to hang out with? And are we going to have a really great project?
Who has good rapport?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All of those things are considered. But in that procurement, the other things that are considered is the I would call it the markup, the overhead and profit, or the fee that's applied. And so that piece is competitively procured. And so the way that progressive design build is executed is that the intent is, at the end of the day, when the owner signs up for the proposal that the design builder will put together to finish the design and build the project. I'm getting a little bit ahead of the process, but we should come back to the process. The intent is that the owner is paying for what it actually costs to build the work with a fair markup. Okay, and so what it actually costs to build the work is what the owner and the design builder will work together to develop during that initial phase. And so there's lots of opportunities. No design builder builds every single thing themselves. They bid out concrete, they bid out equipment, they bid out rebar, lots of things, which is all competitively procured. And the owner has the opportunity to have visibility into all of that, which is something that the owner never gets to see in a design bid build delivery. Okay. And then what's left is the self-performance, right? The labor and the craft labor that the design builder is self-performing themselves. And so the team works together in what's called an open book review. So the design builder will say, here's my estimate to pour all of this concrete, or whatever scope of work that they self-perform. And then we we go through that with a fine-tooth comb and demonstrate. We provide corresponding validating estimates and information. We talk with them about the assumptions that lead into their hourly estimates till we get to a point that we say, yeah, we've reviewed this in detail and we agree that on the basis for this work and that these labor hours that you're proposing to do the work is accurate.
Yeah.
And then there's also an opportunity in terms of the execution to manage how that work is paid for and documented to make sure that, they didn't say, oh, it's going to take us 1 million hours and then they do it and it's 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Also hearing you kind of compare the progressive design build and bid, what is it?
Design bid build. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like progressive design build inherently allows for more transparency as well.
100%.
Yeah, definitely picking up on that. And
Yeah.
of course, here at the Las Virgenes Triunfo Joint Powers Authority, aka the JPA, that is one of our guiding principles: transparency.
And I can talk a little bit about how we specifically procured this project. And one thing I'll say about low bid is I think there's a perception that low bid means you're getting the lowest cost, and I don't think that's always the case. With that traditional method, you could have a bidder come in who is the low bid when they see the plans, but when you get to the end of the project, you've had enough change orders and there's been enough conflict there where you may not be actually getting the lowest price.
Yeah.
So for our project, we went through a full year official procurement. We probably spent 3 years meeting the teams and getting to know everybody, but we had 7 potential progressive design build teams that were interested in the project. We first went through an RFQ process, so a request for qualifications. As Michelle said, at that point we're just looking at really their history, their bona fides, and what they've done before and what the team is, but it wasn't really specific to our project yet. In that phase, we narrowed it down from 7 down to 3. The proposal phase is quite expensive for firms to put a proposal together, so we want to make sure that we're not asking for 7 proposals when we can narrow it down a little bit in that first stage. So then we put out a request for proposals. The way we selected was we didn't look at price at all for the selection. So we look at how they're going to deliver the project.
Oh, that's interesting.
What their ideas are, and but price still does come in. So we kind of made our selection as a selection committee. We had our preferred progressive design builder, and then at that point we open up a separate envelope that is their actual bid, and we look at all 3 of them. And at that stage, we kind of compare it. For our particular project, I think they were within like 10%. They were all very closely grouped, which is a good indication that you're getting a good market price.
Right.
But then we go line by line, and before they're actually contracted, we talk about different tasks within it. This task seems like it's a little higher priced. Why are you assuming so much? So there is that opportunity, even at the very beginning phase, before we even have anyone on board, to kind of gut check that cost. So it is best value because we're choosing on their proposal, on their qualifications.
Right.
But price does come into the negotiations before a final contract is
And we're
signed.
still doing our due diligence to make sure it is competitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we're looking at cost the entire delivery of the project as well, which we could talk about as well. But cost is a lot of my conversations as the program manager.
Yeah, of course, and it's so diametrically opposed to like my experience with taking bids when I'm ordering something like swag. I'm saying like rubber ducky keychains and like hand sanitizers. Like I have to go with the lowest bidder. We're not thinking about qualifications and experience on imprinting pens here. So it's very different for a project of this scale and of this scope, indeed. So we talked a little bit earlier about how this model is new to us. How long has this been around, Michelle? And are there other agencies using PDB delivery?
Yeah, so you've heard me use the phrase collaborative delivery.
Yeah.
You will also hear in the market, as you talk with folks, the term alternative delivery. And so the industry is trying to move towards collaborative delivery because we've been delivering using these types of models for 20, almost 30 years. Design, build, construction manager at risk, or CMGC, or some other models. And so there's a great amount of experience in the market with these types of models. Originally, design build was kind of the OG design build was. It was called fixed price design build, and you put together a big old stack of documents and say, give me exactly everything that's in these documents.
Oh, wow.
And then proposers would bid on that and say, here's my price to design and build it. And that has its place. But what owners didn't like is they didn't get to provide input as the design was evolving and evolving and developing. And so progressive design build really came out of, like, we like the performance risk transfer, we like the designer and contractor working together, but we want to be engaged because, you know, we're going to be operating this facility at the end of the day, and our staff need to have some input on something that they're going to be, you know, the end users for. And so progressive design build kind of has evolved, I would say, over the last 15 years or so, to be the model that is frankly the fastest growing model procurement approach in the water space in the U.S. It's growing about 10% year over year, and that's despite, you know, valleys in, you know, the growth of capital programs across the U.S. Because there's, for really big, challenging projects or technically challenging projects, owners like the opportunity to stay engaged, as well as deliver in a more collaborative way for these, you know, more challenging projects.
Sure. Would you say that it's kind of like the cutting edge, you know, method of delivery for something like this, or maybe not quite?
I think we're past that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think what's that innovation curve, right? We're towards the middle, right? And I think so there's a couple organizations that do research regularly, connecting with the market and kind of looking at what's going on. And the expectation is within the next couple of years on a dollar amount basis, so that not the number of projects, but the total revenue that's spent in the water space, that design build will represent 47% of the projects in the water space. So that there's some really big projects in there that drive that. Yeah. But it is, I would say, more the norm, especially when you look at these larger and more complicated projects. When you look at waterline extension projects, you don't see this model because, you know, most owners and designers, they know how to do that. There's nothing that's really tricky about it. Been doing it for decades. We understand the risks, and so owners are really comfortable. Like, I don't need some help.
Yeah, there's not the same level of need for innovation. If we're replacing 2 miles of pipeline, that's a pretty straightforward job. On ours, we do have a significant amount of pipeline under our progressive design build umbrella, but it is different pipeline than we're used to. You know, it's a 14-mile brine line. We don't have any brine lines. We're dealing with issues like scaling, like constructing outside of our service area. So it made sense to include the pipelines for our particular project, and just the coordination between those pipelines and the facility itself. Having a completely different contract, different designer, different contractor for a pipeline that eventually has to meet up with that building can introduce some risk. I did just want to comment on the earlier question. You know, I agree. This isn't, the alternative delivery stuff is not new. It is a bit newer to the public sector. It's been around the private sector for quite a while. But when we started this project, we actually had a legal opinion as to some current statute that was on the books and how we could apply it to being able to deliver this through progressive design build. During our procurement phase, they actually updated the laws and spoke more specifically as to what kind of projects public utilities could use progressive design build for. So we actually didn't need that legal opinion. They made it more explicit. It was very clear that this was a very good fit for us. But there was changes in the law that needed to happen to make this a more accessible contract vehicle for public.
And that happened when we were already, like, you said around procurement?
It was
22?
That sounds right. At the beginning of 22, that was a water collaborative delivery advocacy effort.
Thank you so much, by the way.
Right. So it was California is complicated in terms of the rules around who can do what, and so it wasn't. So what the new Senate Bill 991, I think, did was basically said anybody who touches water in California, you don't have to be a charter city or a special district or however you were formed, doesn't matter. Anybody within the state of California that manages water projects can utilize progressive design build. And so what that has done is really opened up I think the floodgates. There's a number of agencies just in the LA and Southern California market that are now moving forward with progressive design build because that those impediments, those legal impediments, are complications about what you could do and couldn't do, and maybe I had to go all the way to the state assembly to get something passed. So that cleared the way so that folks, agencies could look at it, and really it's a tool that should be in every owner's toolbox. It's it's not the hammer that's perfect for every job, but it's a tool that can provide real benefit.
Wow, I didn't even know that there were restrictions on who can do this kind of project delivery. That was a huge...
It was more that it was like unclear, right? So
Okay.
so we were sort of going out with our legal counsel saying that yes, the way the law is written, it does apply to this kind of project, but it was still an opinion. Now it's on the books. It's
Right.
very
Right.
clear. We don't need to rest on our legal advisors. I mean, it's very clear that this project is completely a fit for progressive design build.
Right.
And appropriately so, right? These are public funds, right? So the state is interested in
Sure.
making sure that they're spent wisely, that there's appropriate competition. And so, of course, there are state statutes that define that. But to Oliver's point, right, there was muddiness and confusion about, did it work? Did it meet these requirements?
Yeah.
And so that really cleared some things up.
Yeah.
Would you say that PDB is kind of suitable for most like water reuse projects, like generally speaking?
I mean, I'd say insofar as water reuse projects are pretty new, and most agencies delivering a water reuse project probably haven't built an advanced purification facility before. In that context, it probably is
Okay.
usually the good fit.
Yeah.
For us, as Michelle was saying, if we see a pipeline design, we've done hundreds of miles of that. We know what we're looking for. We know what needs to be in there, and we have confidence to take possession of those design drawings and to take ownership of them
Right.
for a bid. We haven't built an advanced. I mean, we've built the demo facility.
Right.
So we're actually a little bit ahead of the game compared to other places that don't have demo facilities. But even with that, it's a totally different animal to build something that's going to be 60 times as big
Right.
from a production level. So for us, just the novelty of it, the newness of it, and kind of getting back to what Michelle said about defining performance as opposed to like, this is the exact design that you need to build, and we'll take responsibility as to whether it works or not. We'd rather say, this is what we need this building to do. This is what we need it to do. Work with us in a collaborative environment, and you're going to take some responsibility that at the end of the day, it does that.
Yeah.
And I would say, I would never say that any of these particular models are the perfect model for every project that falls into these characteristics, right?
Sure.
Each project is unique. In addition to what Oliver, shared about the performance requirements, I think the other place where this model, PDB, provides a lot of benefit in the space we are at right now is early cost certainty, right? So unlike design, bid, build, I talked about, right? You design something, you have 100% set of plans and specs, and you go to the market and you get bids in, and it's very exciting and dramatic. You get these envelopes and you rip them open, and I mean, you all know what has happened with escalation and inflation and supply chain issues of
All too well.
right? It's a mess out
Yeah.
there, right? And so when you rip those envelopes open on bid day and the price is 20% more or 50% more than you have budgeted, it's a real problem because you've already invested all of this money in the 100% design. And so unwinding that is expensive.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of progressive design build that's really valuable in the space that we're in right now is as you bring that design builder on board and you're just starting into the design, you've got early estimates at 10% design, at 30% design, and then the owners have the opportunity, the challenge and the opportunity to say, oh, wow, all right, well, what are we going to do?
Right. Before we
Are
get to the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we going to change the scope? Are we going to get more funding?
Right.
Can we go after grants? Do we need to raise our rates? And you can make a decision about how to course correct before you've spent all that money on design.
Yeah.
And early on, it's really easy from a design perspective to course correct. Much easier than at 100% design. So it helps owners better react
And
to the
adapt.
market conditions and
Yeah.
adapt to the market conditions that we're dealing with right now. It's starting to level off a little bit, but if an agency wasn't raising rates 18% a year, which no agency would do, then they're behind. Right? Just based on how quickly market conditions have driven up prices over the last several years.
Yeah, and I mean, this couldn't be more important, especially given the state of our economy. We know we're all feeling the squeeze. Having that kind of flexibility and adaptability ultimately allows it us to have, less impact on our ratepayers
Right,
who end up
right.
footing the bill after we go for everybody else's money.
Yeah.
Right?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the cost certainty is such an important point because really it takes cost from a result of the from being a result of the process to being really a driver of the process. And we have that early cost certainty at 10%, at 30%. We, first of all, it's open book, so we're seeing what builds into it, and some of these cost estimates. I mean, we have a cost estimate in this job that's 3,000 line items, so you're seeing everything down to like bolts and stuff as what everything costs, and the design builder has to make assumptions, and at that early stage, 10% design, 30% design, the building's not fully designed yet, so they may be taking conservative assumptions, and then we can help guide the design process to get to a price that we have the budget for, that our ratepayers can accept, that still does the job of what we're trying to do, but maybe doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we may have otherwise built into a traditional job. And yeah, even what Michelle said is perfect. Like when you open those bids, first of all, you don't get an engineer's estimate as to what that cost is till very late in the design, and you've already made all those decisions. So even if you want to change it with the designer, that's going to have a big cost impact. But then you open the bids, and they could be all over the place, and they could be 50% more than what the engineer thought, and they could be 100% off of their competitors. And so now you're having to go with a low bid. You've got, let's say you have 4 bidders. One bidder is 50% less than the other 3. You've got to go with the low one.
Right.
But I mean, immediately you're thinking, did they miss something? Is this project going to just be
Right.
arguing over price for the next 2 years? So when everybody has cost on the table and we're designing with that in mind the entire stretch of the way, it just takes those surprises out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One other aspect that I think is really helpful in the space that we're in the world today is, we hear about supply chain issues, right? You guys have. We don't have as many ships off of Long Beach as you used to, but, it's still a big deal. So some electrical gear that used to be, 12 weeks to 6 months, like once you order it till it arrives on the job site, might be 2 years still, right? And it could be based on little chips. It could be all kinds of things, right? So one of the things that Progressive Design Build allows the team to do is identify, okay, this is the gear or the pumps or whatever pieces of equipment that's going to take a really long time because you've got your contractor on board and they have relationships with all of these suppliers, and you can buy them early. Yep. You can get in line. And, if you were going to, again, wait till 100% design, then your schedule is blown, right?
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity to not only buy that stuff early, but also, standardize, right? The owner gets to say, oh, you got these 3 bids for, this electrical gear or this control system equipment.
Yeah.
And we'd like it all to be the same. We'd like it to be the same as some of our other facilities or facilities that's interfacing with, because
We
your
like them
team
to talk to each other.
Right, they want to talk to each other. We know how to maintain the equipment. We get good support, and so long as they're within the realm of competitiveness, right? The owner can say, yeah, this is $3,000 more for this several $100,000 item, but it's standardized, and so this is what we want. And the owner gets to be involved in those decisions.
Yeah, and to your point about the schedule, right? And Oliver, you touched on this earlier, but I think all of our listeners and viewers and us here understand how important it is to stay on schedule. But for us, we also have that regulatory component, right? So, we're looking at being full scale online by 2028, but no matter what, we have to be out of Malibu Creek to meet that regulatory requirement by 2030. Yep. So PDB allowing us to keep things on time is really critical, because whenever you're breaking those regulatory rules, you're paying a lot of money, right? Which is another cost to our ratepayers. So that kind of, benefit is really important.
Yeah, a good example for our job is we're at the basis of the design stage, which would be considered like a 15%, maybe 20% design. So only about a fifth design, and we're already having meetings with the Progressive Design Builder about procurement strategy and what items have long lead times. Like, we wouldn't be having those conversations until we had a contractor on board in a traditional method. So we're a year and a half ahead of having those conversations, and we can preempt some of those long lead times. I mean, 2 years is a real thing for a lot of equipment.
That is
And
so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real though.
Yeah, and the contractor can, at this point, normally we wouldn't even know who the contractor is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
We now have a contractor who can already start reaching out to suppliers and may not even be putting purchase orders in, but saying, hey, we're going to need this and this on around this time. How do we get in line now and just start having those conversations so that we're not caught in the back foot and waiting around for some piece of equipment that stops all construction.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to get back to that in a second. You kind of spoke to the phase that we're currently in design build, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk a little bit about the team itself, because we have part of our team here. But when we're talking about PDB, I mean, we're working with multiple firms, right? So Walsh, Carollo, Jacobs. These are all separate firms that are working together to deliver this project. So kind of talk about why a project like this requires so many firms and kind of what are the responsibilities of each.
Sure. So I'll start with Jacobs, and I'll let you talk about your PDB team. So, Jacobs is the owner's advisor for the district.
What does that mean?
So what that means is we're advising. So because this is a new model for the district, and let me back up. So I would say owner's advisor and program manager, as well. So we're here to provide anything that's needed where the district doesn't have either capacity, so it's kind of butts and seats, like enough people, or capability. And so capability would be things like, we want to have, I spoke to it earlier, somebody review in excruciating detail the cost estimate, and we don't have, hard bid cost estimators in-house. So there's a long list of things that we can do, and we do, to support the district. And so one of those, my role specifically is to support our team in the executing the best practices and bringing those best practices around. First, the procurement, right? Oliver spoke to that earlier, making sure that, we're teasing out what are the things that really matter? What are the things that you want to see? And then, looking at those, the information that we're getting from those folks that responded to the SOQ and their proposals, like, how does that grab us, right? Here's some feedback on terms of, how we see their answers to some of those questions. So the procurement, supporting the contract, right? Although Las Virgenes had external legal counsel, we provided some input and observations in there.
Very helpful input.
To make sure that contract was commercially viable, right? The district wasn't trying to, put unreasonable contract terms on the market so that the market said, no, thank you, we're not, you guys don't seem very great to work with. So we help support the procurement, and then we're helping to make sure things are moving along, facilitate things. There's a lot of moving parts. It's a big project, providing technical reviews. Again, AWT is a pretty new technology, so we've got technology folks that are saying, here's what we think of what they're saying. Here's the questions we have for them to make sure that that the district can feel, again, the design builder's responsible for that, but the district has a responsibility to yourselves, to your ratepayers, to make sure you're getting the quality that you're expecting, you're meeting the requirements. And so we're kind of a third-party check on that type of things, all the way from process down to, as we get further along, the electrical drawings and specs, right? Helping interface with your O&M team, if that makes sense. So we're really a support entity to help the district with all the parts and pieces to make sure that the program goes well, and that helping, just kind of manage that interface with the design build team.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that, and just highlight, we'd be pretty lost without Jacobs in our corner.
We'd be in a pretty bad place.
Yeah, I mean, so Jacobs came on, was it 2020 or 2021?
Was it post-pandemic?
It might have been pre. So yeah, I mean,
it was really close.
I mean, after a feasibility study to make sure we can even do this project, bringing on an owner's advisor, bringing on Jacobs was one of the first steps we needed to take. It's not just about. Yeah, Jacobs helped us really lay the foundation to be a district that was able to deliver a progressive design build project, to have the in-house resources to build a $466 million program from scratch. we would have way too many people for
Right, it's
our
not
day-to-day
common.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It wouldn't
And you'd
make
have to get rid of
sense.
them at the end. And
Right.
that's
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, like one example of what Jacob's helped us out with recently is, we have this BODR, which is a pretty important step along the design path. We don't have any in-house membrane experts. We don't have any in-house UV-AOP experts. I mean, we have folks who know our system and who are very knowledgeable and learned about it. But I mean, Jacobs has folks who've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah, and that's niche, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
to have that kind of, specialty or expertise for someone in-house, and we've never had a project like
Right.
this, that would never happen.
Right. It's like not only are we not able to build this in-house, like we need the help just to be able to make sure that like everything is meeting our needs and that we're reviewing it properly. So yeah, the OA program manager role that Jacobs fills is makes my life a lot easier, absolutely vital to the project. So they came on board early on, helped us set up the procurement, as Michelle said, and how to pick a team that we wanted to work with. We ended up with the Walsh team out of those seven potential teams.
Mm-hmm.
Each of them had a different kind of structure. Some are contractor led.
Mm-hmm.
Some are a single company that has design capabilities and construction capability. That's called integrated delivery.
All in-house, right?
Pretty much all in-house.
Yeah.
They all have different levels of how much work they're going to do themselves versus how much they're going to subcontract out.
Mm-hmm.
For us, Walsh had Walsh, Brown and Caldwell, Carollo, during the proposal phase actually showed a lot of the depth of their team. I mean, they had 20 subs already identified as being on board. I mean, just the top of my head,
Okay.
Trussell Technologies, RRM, who's doing the architecture, Urban Water Group, who's doing the landscaping, Taft Electric. I mean, these are key players on a team that we're also able to look at during that proposal phase and consider. And then we also work with them as we progress the design and bring on other subcontractors. So the progressive design build team, the reason we need all these folks is we're building a building from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does the building have to look nice, so you need a good architect. The landscaping has to look good. The electrical has to work right. All the mechanical has to be right. So there's just so many aspects of building this building from scratch, and everything has to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all got to be, when it's all under one team and they're working together. For the most part, all of them from the beginning,
Right.
you end up with better results.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that team, right, the contract that the district has is with Walsh.
Mm-hmm.
They are the single point of responsibility.
Okay.
And so they're responsible for all of those design sub-consultants and then subcontractors working under their team. And so, again, back to design, bid, build, right? In that scenario, the district would need to manage the designer, the contract
Mm-hmm.
over here, and the contractor, and all the interface between them. In this model,
lot of overhead, it
one
sounds
contract, just a lot. One contract. So, Oliver and our team Jacob's support team is managing Walsh.
Mm-hmm.
And they are making sure all the stuff that needs to happen between the design and the construction and the pre-construction and all the members of their team, they're managing that interface.
So it's like a top-down collaborative.
It's all
Yep.
flowing up through
Yeah.
Walsh. If there's an issue, we start with Walsh.
Yep.
Okay.
And, because it's collaborative, we typically have those other major players within the room. If it's something specific to a certain discipline, we'll have that sub in the room. But at the end of the day, the designer can't point at the contractor and saying their fault and contractor, because they're on the same team.
right.
They're supposed to be working together. And we're on that team as well, right? So
Yeah.
it leads to less passing of the buck. The buck really stops first at Walsh and then with us, the owner, with Jacobs having our back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, several teams, this takes a lot of manpower, right?
It's a big project.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, you kind of spoke to the components of it. Can you now get into kind of where we are in the process? You guys have been entrenched in hours-long meetings,
Yes.
days after days. Can you kind of talk about how it's been so far, where we're at, and kind of where we're headed roughly?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year was really procurement, about a year-long procurement process, ended with selecting Walsh. They came under contract in March. There was a period of negotiation, getting paperwork set up and all that. So really they hit the ground running in April.
Okay.
Since then, they've been building towards what's called a basis of design report. And so that's really as it sounds, serves the basis for that design. And from there, they'll then design 30%, 60%, and there'll be those milestones where we get to review the design at those major places. So what I keep telling our staff is right now our role as the owner is decision makers and making quick decisions, because they can only move as fast as we tell them, like, yes, that that building facade looks good.
Right.
That piece of equipment is what we want, is going to do the job. And there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, I guess. Like at the end of the day, because it's performance spec, they need a building that does a certain thing. In our case, it treats 6 MGD of product water in a seasonal, at different rates throughout the season, meets surface water augmentation standards, blended in a reservoir. So there are these general guidelines of what it has to do, but there's a lot of ways to get there, and there's a lot of negotiation with regulators as to what water quality we're going to have to meet. So there are a lot of dynamic pieces, and right now, as you've seen with these 4-hour workshops, 6-hour workshops, the best way to get through a lot of these issues is get everybody in a room, talk about what the options are, talk about why this may be safer, but it's higher cost, and you're paying X amount more for this, but
is it worth it?
Yeah, is it worth it? And so just going through, and it's down into the weeds, right? Like some are big decisions, like do we add a 4th process to this plant? Some are really more in the weeds decisions, like how many tanks do we have to clean this RO filter, or so we're going through all of that. And then all those decisions feed into this basis of design report, which we are reviewing right now.
Okay.
And then we're looking to hopefully get to 30% design, I believe, around February of next year.
And you said we're at about 10 to 15 right now?
Yeah, well, Jacobs really took us to about 10. I'd say basis design maybe more like 20.
Okay.
It's a little misleading, I feel like, in those early days, because so many things are happening to get from 10 to 20.
Sure.
It seems like a small jump, but it's not. It's a really big jump.
Sure.
It's the foundation for all those other stages. But yeah, we're about, I'd say 20 right now. We'll get to 30 in February, and then it starts moving a lot faster. You get to 60 mid to end of 2025. And then when we hit 60, that's where it goes from phase 1 to phase 2.
Okay.
This is one of the other great things about progressive design build is I think a lot of owners were worried, like, well, when we put a job out to bid traditionally, if we get bids and it's 3 times higher than what we thought, we can't afford it, we can just not award the job. Like, where's our mechanism for when this gets too expensive, or we don't like working with the firm, or something changes? How do we get out of this giant contract? And that's what's called the off-ramp, which no owner, no PDB team really wants to use, but it's there as a
contingency.
But really, what we're working to in phase 1 is getting to a guaranteed maximum price. So once we get to 60% end of phase 1, the Walsh team will come to us and say, okay, we know enough now about what we're building, and you've seen what's gone into it, and here's our markups, that this is the cost to finish the design and to build the thing.
Okay.
And then we work with them on that, right? Well, we've been working with them the whole way up to it, so it shouldn't be a surprise at that phase anyway.
Right.
But we do, as the owner, then have the option to say, this is too expensive. The way we're doing this, we think we can go save some money by just taking this out to the market and doing low bid. There's a lot of risks and downsides to that, obviously. But that mechanism is in there so that you're not locked in throughout the whole process. So anyway, we're trying to get to that phase 2 guaranteed maximum price by the end of 2025, and then in 2026 we would really start. We'd be finishing the design and starting construction.
So then we start construction at 100%.
I think for this project, pretty much yes. There are progressive design build structures where you'd be doing some work while you're finishing up that design. It's a little into the weeds. There probably is some work that will be getting done as they finish up the design, but the lion's share of the construction starts once we have 100% drawings. Yeah.
So phase 1 is like 0 to 60%. What would you say phase 2 is? And actually, what's phase 1 called? Is there a name for it?
Phase 1.
Phase 1, yeah.
Or, design and pre-construction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
And then guaranteed max price is really the big thing with phase 2.
Yeah, because that's what, for phase 1, we got the bids during the proposal phase, and that's what we authorized for the cost of phase 1. Phase 2, the guaranteed maximum price will be what the board votes on and what we allocate to that job. And then it's the design builder's job in conjunction with us to keep it to that guaranteed maximum price. There are some things that could cause a change order, but it's not the same amount of risk that you see with a
Right.
with a traditional project. So yeah, and I guess to the point of like having 100% design before you construct, I think the difference is there's so much pre-construction that's happening even in phase one,
Sure.
and as you're finishing the design in phase two, that it's a lot more overlap than you would see
Right.
traditionally.
Because we're not breaking ground until 2026 now, right?
Correct.
But there's going to be some work starting out there like next week, isn't there, at the construction site?
That's some like pre-construction stuff, like doing geotechnical investigation,
Right.
And that's a lot of, like, you'd still see that during design. Like
Okay.
if you had a traditional designer on, they'd be doing surveys or taking site borings or
Okay.
getting the information they need to do that design. So
Sure.
that's not too different, but it is. I mean, you could see something like site clearing and grubbing or early site prep while
Yeah.
the design is still being finalized, because at 80%, 90%, like, you're not changing the site.
Sure.
You know, you're changing small things in the building and you're fine tuning that.
Let me take it. So that was great description on all of that. Key thing in terms of that early work, right? There's no construction that's done before that component that they're constructing is 100%. The design of that
Designed.
component is completed. There are building permits, early grading permits that need to be secured. However, you can complete the design of a whole or sometimes even the foundation for a structure while you're still dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the design for the electrical system
Got
or
it.
whatever.
Okay.
And so what the design teams will do is break out different packages and say, the hole that we need to build and this retaining wall or maybe piles or whatever, that's well enough defined. We're going to finish the design for that, put together a set of documents, go through all the appropriate building and grading permits and get that approved, and then we can start that construction
Yeah.
while we're completing the design for the other portion of the drawings, like the vast majority of the portions of the drawings. So that's a really common approach, just to kind of move the schedule ahead, get things going, get things out of the way,
Yeah.
and it's something that everybody can agree to. And so I do just want to, pile on with respect to the off-ramp that Oscar, you did a great job describing, right? So, it's like the nuclear option, right? Nobody wants to spend all that work
The
to
red
get to this
button.
point, working together and saying, yeah, well, we don't trust you enough, or we don't have enough money, and so that, I would say, if you get to that point, it doesn't happen very often, because it's really a failure of the process. And I would say, this progressive design build, it's driven by relationships, right? And so if you get the right team and everybody comes to the table and moves forward, it doesn't happen. However, it needs to be. It's a critical aspect of the contractual mechanism around progressive design build, because owners do need to have a walkaway position, even if it's a horrible one.
Sure.
I will say that design builders do not make their money on the phase one, right?
They wanna build it.
They want to build it, right? Besides the fact that building stuff is fun and cool,
Yeah.
right? That's where they make their money. So they're incentivized to work to a point that when, that guaranteed maximum price proposal is submitted and reviewed, and it has 3,000 or 12,000 lines of estimates. It includes the drawings that say this is exactly what we're building. Do we all agree? Yes.
Right.
So that by the time they get there, everybody's like, yeah, makes sense. The costs are validated. There's no surprises. It's exactly what you told us over the last 6 months to a year it was
Yeah.
going to cost. It reflects exactly the facility that we want. So let's go ahead. But if an owner got to that point and they didn't feel that way, they need to have that walk-away position to just incentivize the design builder to make sure that they're on their best behavior. Hopefully they're on their best behavior because they like to do the work and they're
Right.
good people and they have a great culture, and most of them are, I would say.
Yeah.
But that off-ramp is a really critical aspect of the contractual basis for the progressive design build model.
Sure.
Yeah, it's definitely from what I've heard, and I don't know if I've even met an owner who's exercised the off ramp, but it's
rare.
it's bad for everybody. It's
Yeah.
bad for the contractor. It's bad for the owner. I mean, we then have to form a relationship with a designer to finish the design,
Yeah.
or find a new designer who's not going to take the 60%. They're going to start from scratch.
And what does all that do?
And then we got
It costs a lot of money, people.
Yeah, and then we got to go to the market and just trust that we're going to get a cheaper price, which, from what I hear, is rare, if ever.
Yeah. And when we're working on a deadline like we are for that, 2030 out of the creek date, that's critical.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can make or break us,
Absolutely.
It would add tons of time, tons of cost.
Yeah.
To the point of the early work package, we actually do have one on this project, and so the specific driver for that was there's an area outside of our service area where the city is going to build a new bike lane.
Okay.
And it's a grant-funded project, so they have to finish by a certain date. And the schedule that we have as is would have meant that we needed to come in after that. And so they're going to put all this money into this 1.5-mile stretch of road.
Yeah.
And then if we come and tear it up, put our pipe in, the cost for us to put it back together, how they built it,
Brand new.
Brand new,
Yeah.
makes it way more expensive.
Right.
So what we've done is we've carved out that 1.5 miles of pipeline, Walsh has done, and then we've authorized them to, while everything else is going from 0 to 60 to that GMP, that 1.5 miles, when we get to that GMP, will be at 100. And so they can immediately, once the GMP is executed, they can start building on that right away.
And is that flexibility afforded to us by PDB specifically?
Absolutely.
Yes, right?
Yeah, the whole structure of this, and there's a push and a pull, right? Like, it's great to fast track something,
Yeah.
but you don't want to piecemeal out the whole project so
Sure.
much that you get to the GMP and you realize, well, I've already authorized half of this.
Yeah.
It kind of gives away that position of that walk away position.
Yeah.
If you get so you have to be strategic as to what you're identifying.
And that really highlights the collaborative nature of this project, right? Not just between the PDB team or the agency itself, but that's a city project, right? So we have to collaborate with the city, and they're on grant funding and timing as well. So that's a lot of coordination.
Yep.
And that flexibility that PDB offers us is critical for stuff like that.
Absolutely, and that kind of gets back to Jacob's role. They've helped set up the foundation for a lot of those relationships, whether it's the cities or the regulators. I mean, before Walsh even came on, we were having regular meetings with the cities that are going to be impacted, with the regulators who are going to sign off on this project ultimately. And then the Walsh team was able to kind of just jump into that process after we'd already kind of formed, had dozens and dozens of meetings with all these entities. So they came in with a wealth of information that we had put together with Jacobs leading up to it. And now we're all having those conversations together. But yeah, it's critically important to make sure that, we're 14 miles of pipeline just for the brine line, 20 miles of pipeline overall. Each city has street repavement schedules and projects of their own, and schools that are in session. So there's all these pinch points that we need to be in close contact so that we can mitigate the impacts to the residents, our customers, and sometimes not even our customers, residents outside of our service area.
As will be the case for our ROC pipeline.
Yeah, they have no idea who we are. They buy their water off of somebody else, but we're tearing up their street. So we need to be sure that we're keeping the impact for them as small as possible.
Yeah. I feel like in learning about PDB with you guys today, I feel like this is the case in life in general. The more I learn, the less linear things are. And it seems like PDB, this delivery method, is a lot more nonlinear than maybe traditional methods. And of course, we talked about how it allows for more flexibility and adaptability as well. Michelle, for you, as kind of our expert in PDB, if you could give a quick pitch to any agencies maybe considering PDB for one of their projects, just a quick, you should be doing this.
Well, I think, it comes back again to right model for the right project for the right owner.
Yeah.
Right. So PDB is I'm never going to say to anybody, everybody should do it.
Yeah.
It's the bomb. Only do it this way, right? You really need to consider the particular aspects. But what PDB does, right, you mentioned it's not linear, right? You're able to overlap these activities and stack them on top of each other so you can move forward more quickly. For smaller agencies, it provides a benefit that you have one entity to work with that's managing all of the interface instead of you as a small agency with limited staff managing the interface yourself, even with support from an owner's advisor. That can be challenging. And then I think the other piece is really just around that performance requirement.
Sure.
When you have something that's really hard or new or different to you, and you as an agency think, I'm a little scared about taking responsibility for this because it's not in our wheelhouse, it's not our bailiwick. That's when thinking about investigating progressive design build as a model really makes sense. I would encourage anybody who's looking from design bid build's not going to work for this project to really dig in and do a pretty in-depth evaluation, kind of looking at things like schedule, cost certainty, quality, innovation, and understand kind of where you're at on the spectrum of what you need for each of those individual items, and then make a robust decision engaging your staff, your management, elected level, and even your community in some instances, because it is different. And so it's worth just making sure you're thinking about it and that the benefits of the model align with the challenges that you have on any particular project.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to point out Jacobs came on before this was a progressive design build project. Jacobs came on as an owner advisor to deliver this project, and then one of the early tasks that you all did was do a board presentation of all the alternative delivery methods and traditional, and said, well, here's your project, here's the challenges, here's the schedule you're trying to achieve, here's the cost you're trying to achieve, and then here's these 5 methods, and this is the benefit of this is the drawbacks of this, and went through each and every one. And it gets back to exactly what Michelle said. It's right method for the right project. We have other projects that we're delivering now that are big, and some that are innovative but maybe not so big. And we've talked internally, like, once you start doing a progressive design build and you got the contract template ready to go, and now we know what it is, and we've all been doing it. There's a tendency to be like, oh, well, let's do this one for
let's do it for all of them. Yeah, that's what I was wondering if that's like a thing.
Yeah, no, and we've had to have some pushback internally for like, this is a good project, and we maybe could get a little bit of schedule benefit if we did progressive design build, but let's say it's 2 pump stations. We know how to do this. We don't need the extra cost to, we can take this risk on. And at the end of the day, we may not even get that many people proposing on it because the progressive design build outfits are maybe more structured to those innovative projects than more
and
of a bread
the
and butter.
scope isn't as complicated or complex, right? For something like that, so it might not be worth it.
Raises a good point, right? So all of this, like, we're all kumbaya, we're all working together, we're getting all this great input early. That is there's a cost associated with that, right? And so to move ahead with this type of model, you have to be convinced that cost is going to pay off for you at the end of the project, right? Oliver talked earlier about design bid build. It may be low bid, but you may end up with a whole bunch of change orders at the end, so your total project cost is higher than you think it is on bid day. And so when you have a project that, the specter of those potential change orders because of the particularities of the project are so high, then you start to say, spending that money up front is going to help us mitigate potential risks, drive down the overall project cost, because we're going to get great ideas from our contracting and design partner early on that's going to drive the cost of the project down, and it's going to keep us out of trouble at the end. And not every project can you say, yes, that's the case. So it's really important to just say, what are my concerns? What are my risks? What are the challenges of this project? And do they align with PDB? Does it make sense? And if yes, great. And it should, again, I echo to every owner I talk with, it should be in your toolbox, right? As like another way to help you deliver capital projects, because it's not an easy gig that you guys have.
No, not at all.
I won't be surprised if this is one of our only progressive design build projects that we do as a JPA for a while. But what it has done is it's opened the door, I think, to alternative delivery. We didn't do anything alternative delivery. Everything was traditional design bid build. There may be some projects that make sense as a CMAR model, as a design build model, but we've sort of taking that first step through the alternative delivery door, and a big step with such a big project. But yeah, I think for what we do, our day-to-day, our bread and butter, I don't see a lot of projects that are a great fit for it.
Okay.
But you never know. I mean, there could
Moving
be
into the future, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what those projects are. It really does get back to you got to look at the project first, and then consider what tools you have in your toolbox. And if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But you got to figure out what you're actually doing to what makes the most sense for the project.
Yep.
Yeah. Oliver, what's been your favorite experience with PDB so far?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, threw a little curveball at you, huh?
Honestly, it's I think it's a learning aspect of it. It's not, it's not maybe totally cutting edge in the market anymore,
right.
But like going through this experience with our staff, getting to know all of Jacob's staff, with the Progressive Design Build staff, having these, the wealth of experts that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and the stuff I get to learn about.
Yeah.
One day it's a membrane, one day it's oak tree mitigation, and building these relationships, I think has been super exciting. There's never not many of my days look like the day before. Like
right.
It's a very dynamic space, so it's been great, and just getting to know the delivery method. Really, I just got a certification specific to design build.
Oh yeah, shout out, share.
It's the Associate Design Build Institute of America. So it's just showing that you have a understanding of some of the basic concepts of progressive design build.
Oh, nice.
And so yeah, it's been really just interesting. There's not many times in your career where you get to set up a contract from scratch.
Right.
When I came in here and I started, we were using a contract template that we've been using for
right.
for decades. So kind of just the novelty of it and the creation of it, I think is really fun. Not just from creating a building, but creating the process inside the organization.
Have you updated your LinkedIn yet?
I did.
Nice.
Right away. As soon as they sent me the email.
Exactly. Shout out to enrichment.
Yes, and thank you to the district for their support of that credential.
Always important.
Yes, great to be.
The JPA believes in continuing education for all of our staff.
It's great to have those opportunities.
100%. Yeah, and I echo your sentiment about getting access to the expertise, right? A couple episodes ago, we had Andy Salveson and Adam Zachheis from Carollo kind of talking about the more technical side of things with advanced purification, and they were getting into it, right? Today we have Michelle to kind of give us the who's who and what's what for PDB, which I've learned so much just from this conversation alone, and I feel like I can communicate it better. There's so much, right? It's very multifaceted, very complex. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us on the podcast, because you did a really good job of kind of explaining why it is like that and how it's beneficial to not just the district and reaching our goals with this project, but also our ratepayers, who are ultimately going to be impacted not just with an improved water supply, but they are going to see increases on their water bill. But it's good to know the details about what we're doing even at the design build phase to keep those impacts minimal.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point. I think this delivery method is really a benefit for our ratepayers. For something this big, it makes it so that we can find the best solution at a cost-effective price and get it done quickly, which in this market, the faster you build something, the more money you're going to save.
Yes. Oh my goodness, especially now. Yeah. So we'll have to tap in with you guys when we're at our next phase and see how things are going.
Anytime. It's been super fun.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you all for viewing and listening. And we will see you next time on the Full Circle podcast. Bye.
Thank you, Riki.